Tonight, out of control prices and record high inflation hitting new heights. Plus, closing argument. What could be the final public hearing investigating the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol?
If Biden's winning, Trump is going to do some crazy shit.
I said, the Lord, and let's get right to the violence.
And humanitarian crisis. The United States set to allow tens of thousands of asylum seekers from Venezuela to legally enter the country while kicking others out. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. Rising inflation's trickle-down effect on the American economy. Welcome to Faith Nation in Washington. I'm John Jessup. Well, the newest numbers are in, and inflation in America is higher than many economists had expected. According to today's Consumer Price Index measurement, inflation increased 0.4% in September, and that's up 8.2% compared to just 1 year ago. The Bureau of Labor Statistics report shows core inflation, a measure that does not include volatile industries like food and energy, hitting a 40-year high. In a statement in response to today's numbers, President Biden touted, quote, progress in the fight against higher prices, while also noting there is still more work to do. On news of the inflation data today, the market sharply dipped, but it ended with one of the biggest rallies seen in years. The Dow ending the day up 827 points, and the S&P up 92. While the high cost of living affects people across the country, the Social Security Administration is announcing a historic increase to monthly payments for program recipients. Come January, there will be an 8.7% boost in benefits. That translates roughly to an extra $140 monthly for Social Security beneficiaries.
The cost of living increase is going to impact people very differently depending on where they live in the U.S. For some people in big cities, it could be a very minuscule increase for them, but in rural areas where inflation is not so impactful for some things, that could go a lot farther.
About 70 million people, including retirees, those with disabilities, and kids, receive Social Security benefits. Well, for more, let's bring in Bankrate's senior economic analyst and Washington Bureau Chief Mark Hamrick. Mark, as always, thanks for being with us. Why don't we start with inflation right there? You tweeted today's report is both difficult and disturbing all around. Mark, what stands out most to you?
Well, John, I think you hit the nail on the head with respect to focusing on that big increase in the core rate, which excludes food and energy, because that, at the highest level in 40 years, is a sign that inflation is becoming entrenched in our economy. But you look at the main causes here, we see food, we see shelter, we see services. The inflation among goods, which was so big during the early days of the pandemic, does seem to be simmering, but inflation is moving around the economy, and it's really holding down the purchasing power of all Americans.
So how do you think the Fed will respond to today's numbers?
Well, that's an easy one, John, because the Federal Reserve is almost exclusively focused right now on trying to get inflation under control, having raised interest rates 5 times already this year. The last 3 really huge increases of 75 basis points or 0.75%. Their next meeting, November 2nd, will expect another big increase, probably another increase at year end, and possibly yet another one early in 2023.
We'll all be watching. Turning now to Social Security with this impending rise in payouts starting in January. Do you think that'll be enough to offset the high cost of the high cost of living that Americans are now facing?
I'm really afraid it won't be, John, because if we look at what happened at the January of this year, it was a 5.9% cost of living increase. And yes, this is the largest increase in 4 decades coming up. But essentially, we're only making up for lost ground. And then we have to be concerned about what the outlook for prices will be in 2023. And think about those on fixed incomes or those who are entirely reliant, exclusively reliant on Social Security for their retirement funding. They're going to have to deal with things like high rents, high medical costs, high food costs, and oh, by the way, heating bills are going to be very high this winter.
Speaking of things that are high, there's been another rise in new unemployment claims announced today. What's contributing to that?
Well, John, we're really continuing at a low level with these new applications for unemployment benefits. The increase of 9,000 is in line with the increase of basically 10,400 new claims coming from the state of Florida, which we know has been so devastated by Hurricane Ian, and there's been economic disruption and damage there. I would expect more hurricane-related claims in the near term, and then we'll see whether there's something going on with layoffs. But the job market remains relatively strong for now.
We only have a half minute left. Real quickly, we didn't mention the R word, recession. Given the fact that inflation is increasing, I think the word you mentioned was entrenched. Do you think we will face recession?
I think the odds are greater that there will be a recession than not, John. Economists put those odds basically at 65% for a recession in the next 12 to 18 months. The key question, John, is how severe, how long will that recession be? I think the chances are it need not be so bad the next time around.
All right, we are out of time. Mark Hamrick with Bankrate. Always appreciate your insights and expertise. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Well, a blow to former President Trump today from the Supreme Court. The justices rejecting a request to insert itself in the fight over documents taken during an FBI raid at Trump's Florida Mar-a-Lago home. The former president wanted the high court to reaffirm a ruling by a lower appeals court allowing a special master to view classified documents taken from Mar-a-Lago. In a one-sentence ruling from the court that denied the request, there were no dissenting justices. Well, the January 6th Select Committee taking a historic step today, voting unanimously 9-0 to subpoena former President Trump. Likely wrapping up its public hearings, the panel outlined former President Trump's role in the breach at the Capitol, today laying out the case Donald Trump had a, quote, premeditated plan to declare victory in the 2020 election, win or lose.
President Trump knew from unassailable sources that his election fraud claims were false. He admitted he had lost the election.
What he's going to do is just declare victory, right? He's going to declare victory. But that doesn't mean he's the winner. He's just going to say he's the winner. If Biden's winning, Trump is going to do some crazy shit.
I said, the Lord, and let's get right to the violence.
That's what I'm saying.
It's no point. It's time to start smashing pumpkins, if you know what I mean.
The closing statements in today's hearing summarizing the House panel's charge. The former president was directly involved in a bid to overturn the 2020 election. Well, to the immigration debate, the Biden administration is moving to curb the growing number of Venezuelans crossing the southern border. This new policy would allow qualifying Venezuelans to travel legally by air to the United States, while those crossing illegally are to be apprehended and sent back to Mexico. Our CBN News White House correspondent Abigail Robertson joins us now. Abigail, what prompted the policy change?
Well, John, this year there has been nearly 4 times the number of Venezuelans caught crossing the southern border than last year. The administration hopes this move will bring these numbers down and create a more orderly process.
The
new program aims to bypass the border by allowing up to 24,000 Venezuelans to fly directly into an interior port of entry.
Those who follow the lawful process we announced yesterday will have the opportunity to travel safely to the United States and become eligible to work here.
Migrants who qualify will go through security screenings, complete health requirements such as vaccinations, and must have a U.S. sponsor to provide financial support.
This advances the Biden administration's pledge under the Los Angeles Declaration for Migration and Protection to expand legal pathways as an alternative to irregular and dangerous migration.
In 2022, U.S. arrests along the border topped more than 2 million for the first time. While campaigning for GOP Senate candidate Herschel Walker, Senator Tom Cotton used the issue against Walker's opponent and the administration.
Raphael Warnock has voted with Joe Biden to keep our border wide open.
And there are new developments on the White House response to photos that surfaced a year ago, appearing to show Border Patrol agents whipping migrants. Through a Freedom of Information request, the Heritage Foundation found that Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas learned via email the photographer believed the incident was being misconstrued, and he never witnessed any whipping. Yet 2 hours later, Mayorkas claimed this.
We, our entire nation, saw horrifying images that do not reflect who we are. We know that those images painfully conjured up the worst elements of our nation's ongoing battle against systemic racism.
With border crossings at an all-time high, even Democratic representatives of border towns are calling on President Biden and Vice President Harris to visit, as Republicans continue making immigration a key campaign issue. John?
CBN White House correspondent Abigail Robertson. Thanks, Abigail. Well, David Beer is the Associate Director of Immigration Studies at the Cato Institute and an expert on legal immigration and border security. He joins us now for more. David, would love for you to weigh in on this administration decision on Venezuelan asylum seekers.
Well, this is a welcome step to open up a legal channel for people to come from Venezuela directly without having to cross the border illegally. That's obviously the only solution to the issue of illegal immigration and the chaos that we've seen at the border. Unfortunately, it's such a small number. I mean, 24,000 is the number of Venezuelan asylum seekers encountered at the border in just a single month this year. And so it's totally insufficient to handle the flow of people, and the real enforcement aspect of this will do is create more chaos. They're talking about sending people who cross the border from Venezuela directly back to Mexico. Those people are not going to stay in Mexico. They're not going to stay in destitute and dangerous cities in Mexico. They're going to recross the border again. And we're going to see apprehensions and arrests of Venezuelans continue to escalate rather than be reduced as a result of this action. So I don't understand how the administration both touts the idea of legal immigration and holds it out as a carrot to get people to comply with the law, but then at the same time caps it at such a low number that it will do no good. In the big picture, it's not going to have a major effect on the number of people crossing the border illegally, and their enforcement actions will ultimately backfire and produce a more chaotic system where people are trying to evade Border Patrol detection rather than turn themselves in to request asylum. And so
David,
it's not going to improve the situation, in my opinion.
Along the lines of border crossings, as you well know, we've all seen some Republican governors in border states are using immigrants to send a message to the administration. What is that message, and do you think it's working?
Well, certainly the administration's action, it does seem to be in response to the political actions taken by these governors to send Venezuelan immigrants to cities in the north. We saw the Florida governor send some Venezuelan immigrants in particular to Massachusetts, to Martha's Vineyard. And I think the administration wants to sort of quiet this issue because it knows that there are millions of displaced Venezuelans, and the problem could increase in number. Unfortunately, I don't think its actions will have much of an effect today.
All right, David Beer with the Cato Institute, we thank you so much for your time and your insights.
Of course, thank you.
Thank you, David. Well, thousands of migrants putting their lives in danger as they make their way to North America. Up next, we visit the jungles in Central America that are deemed one of the world's deadliest places for those making the trek. Welcome back. The Central American jungles of the Darien Gap are considered to be among the most dangerous places on Earth. Still, daily, many immigrants from Venezuela and around the world end up in Panama trying to push their way through the harsh conditions with the goal of making it to America. Instead, as Chuck Holton reports, many end up overwhelming local villages.
There's a flash flood of human misery flowing down this swollen river deep in the Darien Gap, that lawless jungle region between Colombia and Panama. Rarely seen numbers of migrants from across the globe are taking their chances on the 6-day walk through the jungle, heading for the U.S. Many of them never make it out alive. Bajo Chiquito is the last outpost of civilization between Panama and Colombia. The lifestyle of the Embera Indians who make their lives here hasn't changed much in hundreds of years. They still rely on the river for everything from food to transport. With no running water or electricity, the one thing this village has is too many visitors. Migrants emerge from the jungle in small groups throughout the day, exhausted, sick, and injured, suffering everything from parasites to trench foot. It's a 3-hour ride upriver to the village in a dugout canoe. And on the way, you get a sense of the scope of the problem.
So we're still about 45 minutes away from Bajo Chiquito, and we're being passed by hundreds of migrants heading down to the next camp closer to the Pan American Highway. Looks like most of them are probably Haitian or Cuban.
By the time we got to the village, more migrants had already replaced the ones we passed on the river. More than 300 people per day are arriving at Bajo Chiquito, and the volunteer medics working in the village are completely overwhelmed. So is the city's rudimentary sewer. The entire village smells like human waste.
We have no electricity here. Look how we are living. The migrants keep coming, more every day. We are in a very difficult position.
Also on this trip, Wisconsin Congressman Tom Tiffany.
Well, the reason I went both to the Rio Grande and now down to Panama is I wanted to see it for myself, to see if it was as bad as what was being represented. When I went to the Rio Grande, it was clearly worse. And it's happening down here also in the Darien Gap. This is an incredibly arduous journey that people are going through the jungle in order to get here. And I mean, we see it right here. People's feet torn up, being carted around in a wheelbarrow. It is awful what is going on, and there's no reason for it.
The horror stories that I'm hearing from the people coming through here, as they step out of the jungle, they're just literally stepping out. They're finishing their walk right this minute as they come out of the jungle. And they're limping their way in, literally, in very bad shape. And they're all telling me there's so many people dying. There's so many people that are dying out here.
They have a population of almost 500 people. They've had over 1,000 migrants at a time that have been going through here, and it's completely disrupted this community. It can be stopped if the Biden administration would just say, okay, we're going to reverse what we did back on January 20th. We're going to secure the border once again, because that's what's unleashed this. And it's overwhelmed this community of Bajo Chiquito that we're in right now.
From Panama's Darien Gap, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
More missile strikes and threats of world war. The latest on the Russian invasion of Ukraine, next. A new warning of World War III tonight from Russia, suggesting an all-out global fight is on the horizon if Ukraine is allowed to join NATO. That rhetoric comes as the Kremlin undertakes a violent new push in the deadly military invasion, while increasing numbers of missile and drone strikes targeting civilians. More than 36 people have been killed since Monday. Ukraine wants to fall under NATO protection, requesting a fast-track membership into the transatlantic alliance. Meanwhile, current members are pledging more for the war-torn country. NATO's Secretary General telling reporters today more air defense systems will be sent to Ukraine. Well, to the Middle East, Israel has long been known for its military capability. With its relatively small size and with enemies on all borders, the Jewish nation realizes the importance of innovation in defense and sharing knowledge with allies. And that cooperation was on full display at a recent military conference. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl brings us a story from Israel.
These helicopters are part of a multi-dimensional live fire exercise attended by 1,500 high-ranking officers, including U.S. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley.
All of us are like-minded. We're all allies and partners of one kind or another, and we are all giving way together to try to figure out what the future operational environment is and to innovate and develop our forces, our organization, our doctrines, our structures, and our equipment in order to meet future challenges.
Here at the Tselim training base, the Israel Defense Forces hosted some 20 countries for an innovation conference. Their aim? Using technology effectively in order to win the war and save lives.
I think the big punchline of all that is multi-dimensional. How we act in a multi-dimensional battlefield and prepare our forces in the air, on the ground, and in the sea.
The objective is to use innovation in dealing with challenges like the ability of enemies to easily obtain tech like drones to use against Israel. One example is creatively gathering enemy intelligence and getting it to the field as quickly as possible. The three-day conference culminated with the live-fire exercise, displaying Israel's capability from the air and ground through its use of helicopters, planes, tanks, drones, and foot soldiers. IDF International spokesman Lieutenant Colonel Richard Hecht sees the conference as a compass in terms of pointing the way to military diplomacy.
We know that when we are acting together with other militaries, we can learn from each other, we can engage, and the fact now that the central command commander here is also engaging with the region.
He adds that it can also send a message on the importance of international stability. Julie Stahl, CBN News, IDF Tselim Base, Israel.
Thanks, Julie. Coming up, a master takes on the fight of helping sick kids. We explain when Faith Nation returns. Finally tonight, the fight against childhood cancer can be devastating for families, but one worldwide group is helping kids go from victims to victors by helping them master an age-old sport. The program is called Kids Kicking Cancer. It uses martial arts therapy to help empower kids, teaching them to overcome challenges. The founder, known as Rabbi G, developed the techniques to relieve anxiety and stress through martial arts, breathing, and guided imagination sessions. Good. Those happy kids look like they're well on their way to recovery. As always, thank you so much for watching Faith Nation. We hope to see you right back here again tomorrow. Have a great night.